What you just saw is a custom flight computer that I built, named Pulse MK1. It has Wi-Fi, accelerometers, gyroscopes, and a whole host of other features. If you want to learn how I built it and how you could design something like it, subscribe to my channel. If you want to see how I built it, as in the soldering process, watch the rest of this video. Okay, so the first parts we're going to do on this board are the SMD parts. So like this part right here, this is the voltage regulator. This needs to be done. And this is actually the back of the board. All the SMD parts are on the back of the board. But then we also need the MOSFETs here, 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 and here. So I'm going to do those first, and I'm going to show you how. This right here is the linear voltage regulator. It's probably a bit hard to see, and it is a little worse for the wear because I have used it. I used it on another prototype board, but it should still work. It'll still work. So what we're first going to do is we're going to tin the pads. So the first thing you want to do when you're doing an SMD part is you want to figure out which pad you want to go through first. For me, I'm going to go for this big one right here. What we're going to do is we're going to hold the soldering iron right there, and then once it's all nice and hot, we're going to take a tiny bit of solder and flow it onto that joint right there. Next, you really do just want a tiny amount. I put a little bit too much on there. But next, what you take is you take your SMD part and you line it up. So for me, line it up right there, and you can use a magnifying glass for this if you want. I do often use magnifying glass just when I'm recording. Makes it a little bit harder to actually see what I'm doing. But that said, you line up your part. I'd say that's pretty lined up. Now what I'm going to do is you just take soldering iron and you can hold it if you want. It's a bit hard to hold in place, but then you just slow this up. Now that we have the one pad nice and soldered on, what I'm going to do is just take the soldering iron and go back and solder every one of the other pads. Just with the tiniest bit of solder. You don't need much. Which really I should take my own advice sometimes. But it really does not take that much. I'm going to make sure there's a nice good connection between the pad and the board. See right there, I put on a little bit too much. On the ones I didn't put quite enough. You just want to make sure there's a nice clean connection. And then now that I have all those done, I'm going to go back to this one. And just since this is such a big pad, I'm going to make sure it's nice thermal. It has a nice amount of thermal mass by adding some more solder. There you go. And on the voltage regulator, it's not bad to use a little more because there's going to be a lot of current flowing through this. But there you go. Next, we're going to go for the MOSFETs. And like I said, MOSFETs are the hardest part of this board. So if you can master the MOSFETs, then you'll be good to go. Alright, so now like I said, the SMD parts are the hardest part of this board. This is the voltage regulator. It's not too bad, but when it really gets difficult is when you try to solder on these MOSFETs. I don't know if you can see, but like these are the tips of the tweezers, and they're the same size as those. My fingernail, that's my fingernail compared to one of those MOSFETs. So it's really easy to lose them. It's really easy to mess up. They can be really difficult to solder. This board in particular has some pretty small MOSFETs, in the future, I'm going to try to design the boards with larger MOSFETs, just so that it's easier to solder. But it's the same process with the MOSFET as it is the voltage regulator. First step is tinning the pad, so I'm gonna pick this pad. It doesn't necessarily matter which pad you pick. It's all just up to preference. But I put a little solder on the tip, put it on the pad, and bam, you've got a pin pad. And now this might be a little difficult to see, but what I have is I put the MOSFET right there. And that's going to be real blurry. See if this can help. But yep, that's the tiny MOSFET. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it in place, because I'm left-handed, so I'm going to hold it in place with my one hand, and I'm going to solder with the other. I'll try to stay out of the way of the camera, this so that you guys can see what I'm doing. But I'm basically just touching my iron to the pad, roll the thing up, and bam, it's soldered. Now, that is a little bit cattywampus. It's not perfectly straight. You can see right here that it's a little bit off center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reflow this, if I can manage it, to reflow it like so. I'm going to use my tweezers ever so gently. Oops, see, that's way too much. Okay, am I happy with that? Yeah, I'm happy with that. It's touching all the pads. It's not perfectly straight, but with something this small, it's going to be really difficult to get it perfectly straight. So now I'm just going to go back and solder the rest of the joints. Like so, just again, the tiniest amount of solder. You really don't need that much. And then you also gotta be like, you gotta be aware of where your iron is, where your solder is, what you're touching, heat and things. Alright, so bam, that's a MOSFET done. Like I said, it is the hardest part, but honestly it's really easy. It just depends on how precise you like to be and how good you are with your hands. So even though it's the hardest one, it's really not that difficult. You just need some practice. Alright, I'm going to the other ones and then I'll just time lapse through those. Alright, so just like that, all 4 of these MOSFETs are done and the linear regulator is too. That's all the surface mount components on this board. So it took me like 20 minutes total, but that's because I spent a lot of the time doing other things, and actually soldering these only took about 3 to 4 minutes. And most of that time was just fidgeting with them, getting them in the right spot. One thing I will recommend is whatever software you use, make sure to print out this. This is like the bill of materials. And so you can see like it lists all of the part names and then all of the part values, right? So here C1 is a 1 UF capacitor. So we can go on the board and we can say, hey, this silk screen says this is C1, so it's the 10, that means the 1 UF capacitor. Or when we say, hey, I have this, this 10 UF capacitor, where does it go? We can then look at the sheet and say, hey, which one's a 10 UF capacitor? Oh, C2 is a 10 UF capacitor, so we know that that goes here. And then we can just pop it in and it's done. It makes it way easier, especially when you get up to the fact that we have like 18, 22, 20, 21 different resistors on this board. So it makes it way easier knowing, being able to tell the difference between what values go where. And I'm thinking about making a series of videos on this flight computer. Definitely comment down below if you would like to see that, but I'm thinking about making it in a way where it's almost like a tutorial, so that if you're someone who's interested in building one of these, or someone who's interested in designing their own flight computer, that you have the resources you need. Because it took me weeks and weeks and weeks of doing research and watching 1,000 YouTube videos and reading through forums, documents, asking questions. It took me a long time to figure out everything that I needed to know in order to do this. Plus, it took me multiple iterations. This is a mess that I was testing from the Mark 1 boards. See, this says Mark 1.3. This is not my first iteration. I also had this mess. I have breadboarding prototypes, a whole mess. So like, it's easier to learn from someone else than it is to just trial and error it. So from here on out, the next parts are really easy. I'm gonna finish the back of the board first, just because it's going to make it easier. So on the back of the board, we have these 4 resistors, and then we have this resistor, these 3, and that's it. So I'm going to show you how to do one of these, and then I'll time lapse the rest. So let's start with R9, right? So R9 is, if we go on our datasheet, we can find R9 is a 4.7k ohm resistor. So then we go in here in our little pack of resistors, and long spiel to say that really this is a 470 ohm resistor. So you want to bend the leads like so, and I like to use a pair of tweezers to help me make these bends, just to make them nice and neat. And then you just pop it in. It really doesn't, it's really simple. I'm going to make all of the horizontals go with the goal facing in. Like, you just pop it in like that. Make sure it's pressed down flat against the board. And then with some components you want to tape them. With other components you can just bend one of the leads. So on the other side you can see I bent this lead right here, and then the other one's still sticking out straight. And then all we have to do is just take our solder and solder the joint. It's really simple. Then we can bend up the other lead and you just solder the lead like so. Let it be done. Now all we have to do is we take these snips and then we snip off one lead and snip off the next. Now we have a fully soldered resistor and it's done. So I will finish the rest of the board, and then I will show you when it's done. Well, finish the rest of the back of the board, since all that there is resistors. If you look right here, you can kind of see why I said it's important to do certain things in a certain order, because now that I've put this resistor in, it would have been really difficult to solder on the linear regulator, because
they're right next to each other, and I would have to like go at a weird angle. And on the top, like some of these resistors, they go underneath where another sensor, where another board, where another piece is going. This outline says that this BMP388 is going to go all here, and if these wires are underneath there, there's no way I'm going to be able to solder them once this is on. So you kind of have to think about it strategically and figure out, hey, what order should I do things in that makes the most sense? Alright, that is all the resistors on this board. It literally took me forever, but that's all the resistors on this board. So the next step is probably to put in all of the terminal blocks, which are these guys. So what I'm going to do is you take your terminal block, right? So right here, and we'll put in this one first. So you put your terminal block on, and then what you do is you take your piece of tape and you just tape it on. Otherwise, see, if I put a terminal block in here, this top part right here, and I flip it over, it falls out. So this tape allows it to stick so that then we can solder those leads right there. And then this is the other fun part. Not fun, but like this is the other useful tip that I have for soldering with those. Is you solder one pin, like so. And a lot of these in particular definitely need a lot of solder because they're going to be handling a lot of current for the pyro channels and stuff, and also there's the main battery. So then you peel that off, and then you can see that, hey, this is sticking up a little bit, and it might not also be perfectly straight. So what you can do is you can hold your board like this, and then take your iron and touch it right there to refill that solder, and then push it down so it's nice and straight. Let go, and then you've got a nice straight pretty connection for your terminal lock. And then you just go and you solder the other lead. The reason you need to solder only one is because it's virtually impossible to reflow two joints at the same time. Like, it's not impossible. You can do it. It just is difficult. Right, there's one, and I'm going to add a little bit more solder to you, even though it'll make it look less nice. It'll increase the thermal mass, which is definitely good. And then, I always clean my tip, like, not necessarily in between every single time, but when I got this kit, it came with a sponge, and it's a little dilapidated now, but if you just clean your tip, it makes it so much easier to solder. And so, what I mean by clean the tip is just take a solder iron and just like gently do this, and then it'll clean off any solder on there and make it so much nicer to solder with. Otherwise, the solder just starts getting icky and everywhere, and it's a mess. So, I will show you. I'll do the rest of the terminal blocks, and then we can move on. So, these boards, they come not soldered, so they come as just a header pin like this. So like what we just soldered, they come as header pins and the board. And I already soldered the header pins on from when I was testing, so that makes it a little easier now. We just have to take it, and you see on here how it says X plus, or Y going that way and X going this way. That also corresponds on here. So there's a Y going up and an X going that way, but also we kind of just have to look where the silk screen is, and then the pins. So it's pretty easy. You just pop it in right there, and then we're going to do the same thing. This one already has enough friction between all those pins. It has enough friction that I don't need to tape it on, but you could if you wanted to. So then we're just going to do, I'm going to solder one pin. And the nice thing about these pads is they're so big that they hold a lot of solder, which is definitely nice. Alright, so then now that, sorry, that was a little mess up, but we can see that it's mostly level with the board, but I want to reflow it just to align it a tiny bit more. Alright, now I'm just going to go through. You can see all of those nice, you can see how there's like almost like a fillet where it kind of concaves around the thing. That's what you want. That's done, which means all that's left is the capacitors and the main and this guy. So I'm gonna do this guy next. It's literally the same process as before, just now you do it on a bigger scale. Whoops, I almost put it in backwards. So again, the exact same process. You just pop it in there, pop that bad boy in, and then since it has so many pins, it creates enough friction that you don't have to worry about taping it in.